Okay, this is Roberto with Full Curl Precision again. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight's an interesting one. Had a viewer, subscriber, asked to do the 3378 Weatherby versus the 30 Nosler versus the 300 PRC. And then it got me thinking, well, if you got some newcomers coming to the channel, they would have heard of common cartridges like 300 Win Mag, so they would have wanted to be able to hear against that. And then my brain went further with it and goes, well, if that's the case, why don't you just have a 6-way slugfest between 30 caliber magnums. So we have the 3378, the 300 Weatherby, the 30 Nosler, the 300 Rum, the 300 PRC, the 300 Win Mag, and that should be it. That should be everything. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting. Now, originally he had asked for a 210 grain AccuBond. Unfortunately, I didn't have a whole lot of information that I could find across the board for these to make it consistent, and I couldn't put them in my GRT, which is my comprehensive app to be able to adjust everything to the same. So what I did was I went down, because I had it available, was a 190 grain AccuBond long range, which has a good BC, a 0.597. I used a 26-inch barrel for every single one. Used H1000 powder, which is a common powder. Works for all of them. I used a 200-yard zero, same scope height, same increments, everything the same. Because again, as I've made clear in other videos, I like as fair a comparison as I can make. So, we're going to save the beast of the 3378 for last, but just for reference, we're going to go through these numbers and we're going to go through them quick because there's a lot of them. So, starting off with a 300 PRC, you have a muzzle velocity. It takes 87 grains of powder of the H1000 to achieve a velocity of 3,167 feet per second. So it's moving along quite well. But that's a lot of powder. Gives you a muzzle energy of 4,232 foot-pounds. And we're just going to with all of this, I'm just going to kind of skip down halfway just because there's a lot. So starting at 600 yards, you have 2,254 feet per second with 2,142 foot-pounds and a drop of 52.3 inches. At 700 yards, 2,119 feet per second with 1,894 foot-pounds and a drop of 80.8 inches. At 800 yards, you got 1,989 feet per second, 1,668 foot-pounds with a drop of 117 inches. 900 yards, you got 1,862 feet per second with 1,463 foot-pounds and a drop of 161.4 inches. 1,000 yards, 1,743 feet per second with 1,282 foot-pounds and a drop of 217 inches. So a really overall pretty good trajectory for a heavy 30 cal. Right below that, we have the 300 Win Mag, which is the most famous 30 caliber magnum probably on the planet. So this is like the standard that everybody tends to measure up against. So here we go. 77.7 grains of H1000. So basically 10 grains of powder less. You get 3,067 feet per second. So it takes almost another, like 9.3 grains of powder to achieve an additional 100 feet per second. Yeah, that's not a significant gap, but whatever. But it is 100 feet per second, and it does add up over trajectory, and you'll see this. Muzzle energy, 3,970. So going down to 600, 2,172 feet per second, 1,991 foot-pounds, 56.3 inches of drop. So, but at 500 yards, you have 4 more inches of drop with the 300 Win Mag than you do with the 300 PRC. 700, 2040, feet per second, 1756 foot-pounds, 86.8 inches of drop. At 800 yards, you got 1912 feet per second with 1543 foot-pounds and 125 inches of drop, as opposed to 117. 900 yards, 1790 feet per second with 1352 foot-pounds and 173.9 inches of drop. And at 1,000 yards, you have 1675 feet per second with 1183 foot-pounds of energy with 234.1 inches of drop. That's a 17-inch gap. Now, I get if you have a good dial on your scope, a good turret, it's not hard to dial 17 inches. But as a natural trajectory on its own without any adjustments, 17 inches of gap is pretty big. So now that we have those out of the way, set that to the side, we're going to go to the 300 rum. So which is a Remington Ultra Magnum. It's not a new cartridge. It's been out since like the 90s. Like mid to late 90s is when they started coming out with it and kind of set the swing for a lot of these big magnums. A lot of copycats, but here we go. 90.8 grains of H1000, 3074. So it's not as good as the 300 PRC. It's a little better than the 300 Win Mag, which is interesting because it's like you'd think with all that extra powder, it would be considerably better than the 300 Win Mag for its velocities, but it's not. You're literally talking a difference of 7 feet per second. It's not very efficient. With 3986 foot-pounds. Again, jumping down to 600. 2178 feet per second with 2001 foot-pounds and 56 inches of drop. 700. 2046 feet per second, 1765 foot-pounds, 86.4 inches of drop. 800 yards, 1918 feet per second, 1551 foot-pounds with 124.6 inches of drop. 900 yards, 1795 feet per second with 1360 foot-pounds and 172.9 inches of drop. 1,000 yards, 1680 with 1680 feet per second with 1190 foot-pounds and 232.8 inches of drop. So here's what's kind of crazy is whatever's going on, and I'm not sure if this is partly the program I'm using, but it seems like it's the 300 rum's not holding its weight. I can see why people would prefer the 300 Win Mag over it because it uses less powder. It's going to have less recoil and seems to be doing the same exact thing. So, and they're less expensive. So, yeah, I would take a 300 Win Mag over 300 rum. According to these numbers, if that's the data. Here we're going to go with a tried and true, one of Weatherby's most famous magnums, the 300 Weatherby Magnum. 82.8 grains of H1000. Okay, and I forgot to mention, every single one of these is at the max pressure of 65,000 CUP. Okay? Everything is right there. So it's pushing every single one of these as hard as you can. So this is as even as possible. Same exact bullet and pushing every cartridge to its capacity with the same powder. And it works. H1000 is known for working well in a whole slew of magnums. So it's not as if the powder has any issues. But here we go. With less powder than the 300 rum, literally by 8 grains, you get a much better velocity. 3,127 feet per second. So you're talking basically a difference of 50 feet per second using less powder. That's really good. With an energy of 4126. Here we go, 600 yards. 2,221 feet per second with 2,081 foot-pounds with 53.9 inches of drop. 700 yards, 2,087 feet per second with 1838 foot-pounds and 83.2 inches of drop. 800 yards, 1958 feet per second, 1617 foot-pounds and 120.1 inches of drop. 900 yards, 1833 feet per second and 1418 foot-pounds and 166.2 inches of drop. And at 1,000 yards, 1,716 feet per second and 1,242 foot-pounds of energy and 223.7 inches of drop. So of all the ones we've kind of introduced so far, it kind of seems that the two closest are the 300 PRC and the 300 Weatherby. The 300 Rum and 300 Win Mag are right now battling for the last place. So yeah, there's that. But honestly, the 300 Weatherby really impressed me. Actually, so did the 300 PRC. I was not expecting that, but kind of makes sense. It does have more powder capacity than the 300 Win Mag, so therefore it should have more ability to throw it. And it's got a sharper shoulder, so it's actually be able to burn its pressures better. Excuse me, get a drink of water. Okay, finishing this off. Here we go. The 30 Nosler. I forgot to write down the muzzle energy on that one, but it really won't matter. You have 82.5 grains of H1000. You're getting a muzzle velocity of 3117 feet per second. That's a pretty good amount of velocity. Going down, this is where really the energy starts mattering, is at distance, not at muzzle. At 600 yards, you got 2213 feet per second and 2,066 foot-pounds, 54.3 inches of drop. 700 yards, you get 2,080 feet per second and 1824 foot-pounds and 83.8 inches of drop. 800 yards, 1950 feet per second, 1604 foot-pounds of energy and 121 inches of drop. 900 yards, 1826 feet per second, 1407 foot-pounds and 167.4 inches of drop. 1,000 yards, 1709 feet per second and 1232 foot-pounds and 225.4 inches of drop. So, not bad, but it was definitely not as impressive as I thought it would be. I figured with the powder reservoir that the 30 Nosler is known for having, it would have been considerably faster than this. But the 30 Nosler, so the 30 Nosler itself was not in the Gordon's reloading tool or in any of my manuals, but I was able to find data directly from Nosler. This is their information that they post online, and you can select different bullets, and the 190 grain AccuBond long range is part of that list. And so they select a whole bunch of powders that they've tested this with, and H1000 is part of it, and they give you different levels. So I picked the highest powder volume, and this is Nosler's own data, 3117 from their website. So if you're wondering where I'm getting this information, most of this is being comprehensive inside the Gordon's reloading tool. But what I don't have, I'm able to find on manufacturers' websites. And so I'm using that as much as I possibly can. And rounding it off, the speed demon of the 30 cals, the 3378 Weatherby Mag. And also the largest, having the largest powder volume of any of the 30 cals, 103 grains of H1000. For reference, out of my standard 270 right now, I'm shooting with 54 grains of H4350. This is nearly twice the powder volume. Okay? It's only 5 grains shy of literally being twice the amount of powder that I use in my 270. That's an insane amount. In fact, it has a larger powder reservoir than the 338 Lapua. Let that sink in. It gives you a muzzle velocity of 3,244 feet per second, an energy of 4439 foot-pounds. Jumping down to 600, 2,316 feet per second, 2,262 foot-pounds, 49.5 inches of drop. 700 yards, 2,179 feet per second, 2,003 foot-pounds, and 76.5 inches of drop. 2,800 yards, 2,046 feet per second, and 1,767 foot-pounds, and 110.8 inches of drop. 900 yards, 1,918 feet per second, 1,552 foot-pounds, and 152.9 inches of drop. 1,000 yards, 1,796 feet per second, and 1,361 foot-pounds, and 205.2 inches of drop. Now, I'm sure if you were to find a different powder or whatever else, you might get different numbers. Again, I tried to pick something that's common, easy to find, that just does a job all around. And so, because it's actually, here's funny, I have a bottle of H1000, and they even, focus, list it. I don't know if you can kind of read it. They list a 300 Win Mag, 300 Remington Ultra Mag, 300 Weatherby Mag, and the 3378 Magnum, all on the bottle directly. Okay? So it's a well-established powder that's common in the industry and delivers good all-around performance. So I selected it. That 3378 Weatherby is an absolute monster. You know, it's also interesting is unless you get a really good rifle and you take it to a gunsmith, work it all out, the problem is with a lot of those rifles, because of the sheer amount of powder and shock that those rifles typically deliver, Weatherby never promised anything better than a 1.5 inch group guaranteed. Yeah, not very good. I know some guys that hand load for these. They have custom rifles in them, and they're getting ultra tight groups. Consistently ultra tight groups. That's cool. But these casings are stupid expensive. They are hard to find. You can easily, if you try to buy a box, you could be easily looking at $100, $120 a box, just factory. Same thing with 30 Nosler. It's not a cheap investment in terms of your casings, your just everything. Whether you're buying a factory load or whether or not you're reloading, it costs a lot of money because of the amount of powder that you have to use to fill these. Same thing when it comes to like the 300 rum. You know, the ones that take the most amount of powder actually here are going to be your 3378 Weatherby Mag, your 300 rum, and the 300 PRC. But the one thing I will say when it comes to commonality of like casings and reloading, the most common are going to be your 300 Win Mag, your 300 PRC, and your 300 Weatherby Mag. So my recommendation is if you're looking to get into a Weatherby Mag, the best bang for the buck, if you're going to stick with a Weatherby, the best bang for the buck is going to be your 300 Weatherby Magnum, because you're getting really good velocities and nowhere near the powder cost. Because here it is. So you're literally talking a difference of 120 feet per second. Okay, is between roughly, so 31.27, 32.44. So you're at, just under 120 feet per second difference. But you're at 82.8 grains of powder versus 103. So literally, it takes another 20 grains of powder per case to achieve a difference of only 120 feet per second. That's not really enough to make it worth it, in my opinion, because you're going to get really similar performances. Yes, the flattest shooting is going to be your 3378. But the nice part about the 300 Weatherby is you can get them in something like a Weatherby Vanguard, which is like, you can find rifles between $500 and $900. They're easy to find. They're common. So you don't have to break the bank getting into this. You're going to have to buy a Weatherby either way, but you can get this like in a Vanguard. You can get it in the Mark V, and I can't remember if it's available in the 307 model. It might be. But you get better rifle options. This, you're just going to have to cough up the cash. You're either going custom or you're going into the Mark V Deluxe type rifles, which have fun finding any of those for under $3,000. So, there's that. And then here's another stupid expensive one, the 30 Nosler. There's not a whole lot of companies chambering in that. Nosler's, as far as I know, the only factory offering of a rifle. So that's stupid expensive. Most Nosler rifles are $2,000 and up. Same thing in rum, the 300 rum, the Remington Ultra Mag, that's hard to find, and that's also ridiculously expensive. So when it comes to balancing your performances with things like cost, your best all-around options are going to be, if you're going to go with a Weatherby, is the 300 Weatherby Mag. You got a 300 PRC, which you can find in just about any rifle manufacturer, and you can get them around $1,000 all day long, even sometimes less. But 300 Win Mag is the most common, and for a reason. It's actually delivering a good amount of performance for what it does. It's the most common. It's the most affordable, even when it comes to reloading. So that's my take. If you're trying to get into the magnums and just starting out into the magnums, 300 Win Mag, 300 Weatherby, or 300 PRC are the best starting points. And if you hit the point where you're just like, yeah, man, I need more muscle, and I don't care what it costs, yeah, go for it. Get a 3378 Weatherby. Just don't get it in a pencil barrel. It's too much recoil and harmonic issues in a pencil barrel. They really don't like a pencil barrel. They like heavier barrels, and understandably so. So there you go. That's the 30 caliber Magnum Slugfest. I hope that helps. I hope it answers a whole lot of questions. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Again, I'm trying to make this channel grow. I do have some other comparisons coming in the future, but yeah, it's a lot of data to wade through. I knew this was going to be an extended video. I hope it helps, and please share it with those who are trying to learn. I'm trying to make this educational and fun. All right, we'll talk to you later.